TV Spotlight. Minder. Minder is the name of a British comedy drama series that ran for 10 seasons across 15 years from 1979 to 1994, producing over 100 episodes, including several Christmas specials. The series starred veteran British character actor George Cole as Arfur Daly, an unscrupulous second-hand car salesman and all-round dodgy businessman who feels the need to employ some sort of physical protection in the form of a minder, also known as a bodyguard. This he finds in the form of a former boxer and ex-con Terry McCann, played by another British TV acting legend, Dennis Waterman, who had shot to fame earlier in the 70s, playing opposite John Thor in the gritty police drama series The Sweeney. Minder was actually made by the same production company as The Sweeney, Euston Films. And when the series started, although it was always a comedy drama, the first series of Minder is slightly more in the gritty mould of The Sweeney than the series would later become. From the second season, the tone was lightened to become more comedic and less gritty. And this change actually did wonders for the show. The first season wasn't all that highly rated, but from the second season onwards, the show's popularity skyrocketed, and it became one of the biggest shows for ITV network in the UK in the 1980s, to such an extent that several Christmas specials were produced, including a nearly 2-hour feature film for Christmas Day in the mid-80s, Minder on the Orient Express, which of course saw Terry and Arfur expanding their dodgy dealings into a rather more exotic setting than was normally the case. As the series continued, other regular or semi-regular characters were introduced, most notably Glyn Edwards as barman Dave from the Winchester Club that was frequently frequented by Arthur and Terry. Dave was only a background character in season 1, but from the second season became more and more prominent, ultimately ending up even being credited in the title sequence. Also notable was Patrick Malahide for his increasingly over-the-top performance as obsessed police officer at Chisholm, who became a considerable thorn in Arthur's side. In fact, Malahide ultimately left the role because not only did he feel he was getting typecast as the increasingly insane police officer, he was also starting to get some abuse from members of the public. Oh dear God, people are insane. The show's original main character was actually Terry, but as the series progressed, it became more and more a double act between Terry and Arthur. Despite the show's massive success throughout the 80s, after the 7th season in the late 80s, Dennis Waterman decided to leave the show, feeling that their ideas had run dry and that the show was really now more about Arthur than it was about Terry. The decision was made to continue the series without Waterman, who had also been responsible for the show's signature theme tune. And he was replaced by Gary Webster as Arthur's nephew, Ray, a younger and somewhat more, intelligent, at least rather more clean-cut and less rough around the edges character than Terry had been. Although the show seemed to carry on reasonably successfully with the new co-lead, it has to be said that Minder never really felt quite the same without the Terry and Arthur dynamic. The show was a staple of my childhood. It ended in 1994, and unlike some shows that I can think of, I'm thinking of the British comedy series Watching, which I may actually do a video on at some point too, which they broadcast in Australia and then stopped broadcasting as far as I'm aware. So I never got to see the end of that originally. Minder they did at least show in full on the ABC in Australia, and I got to see the final season. However, after that, it was a really long time before I got to see anything of Minder ever again, despite, as I said, it being one of those shows that was just always there throughout my childhood. I finally saw Minder again, I guess it would have been late 2000s when I managed to get the first season on DVD. Now, I don't know if the whole series was ever released in Australia. I don't think it was, because at that time I was kind of getting stuff on eBay. But the show was also really freaking expensive to buy the individual seasons of, and I never really progressed beyond season 2. However, just recently I have managed to get, it was reasonably expensive, but not as expensive as buying the individual seasons, and managed to get a complete box set of all 10 seasons plus the Christmas specials. And I've just started from the very beginning again, and I'm enjoying it enormously. I'm also really looking forward to watching the Christmas specials over the course of the next few Christmases. I love Minder. Terry and Arfur became absolute icons in the 80s, and though the show would no doubt be considered very politically incorrect nowadays because, well, it actually represents how people actually talked in the late 70s and 80s, and the phrases and expressions that they used, which would never be allowed anywhere near modern television, which takes place in some airy-fairy PC land that doesn't actually exist. Minder is a television classic. The chemistry between Waterman and George Cole was legendary, and the show is just good, honest entertainment from the days when British television could actually make stuff like this that entertained normal, ordinary people and had that as its main priority. If you've never seen Minder, which I imagine many overseas viewers probably haven't, I would recommend giving it a go if you can. Maybe try and get the first season cheap if the idea of the season box set seems a bit too expensive on the go. But yeah, I would strongly recommend Minder. It's a classic slice of 70s, 80s British television, and it's just great fun.